Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into some seriously groundbreaking science? We're talking about the 2024 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, and let me tell you, the discovery that won microRNA is mind-blowing stuff.
It really is. Imagine tiny molecules, so small they were once overlooked, holding the keys to how our genes actually work.
It's like they're the secret code controlling the blueprint of life. We've got a ton of articles and videos on this, and I can't wait to dig in. But first, can we talk about Gary Ruvkun, one of the Nobel laureates? This guy's path to a Nobel Prize is wild.
Yeah, who knew that living in a van and planting trees would lead to a scientific breakthrough? It really shows that inspiration can strike anywhere.
It proves you don't have to fit the stereotypical scientist mold. Speaking of which, one article mentioned that Ruvkun was initially inspired by an issue of Scientific American about recombinant DNA. That always sounded revolutionary to me, but I need a little refresher. What made it such a big deal?
Imagine being able to edit DNA like you edit a document, cutting, pasting, moving things around. Recombinant DNA technology gave scientists the power to do just that.
Wow, so it really did revolutionize genetics. No wonder it caught Ruvkun's eye. And it ultimately led him to this whole other world of microRNAs. Okay, so let's talk about these tiny but mighty molecules. What exactly are microRNAs?
Well, you know how DNA is the blueprint of life, right? Think of microRNAs as these crucial regulators, making sure that blueprint is being read correctly. They're like the quality control team for our genes.
Okay, so we've got the DNA blueprint, but how do they actually make sure the instructions are followed?
Think of it this way. Genes in our DNA contain instructions to build proteins, those workhorses of our cells. MicroRNAs control how much of each protein gets made.
So it's not just about turning genes on or off, but more like a volume knob, right? They can fine-tune how much of a protein is produced.
Precisely. And sometimes they can crank that volume down to zero, completely blocking the production of a protein. It's a powerful mechanism.
It sounds incredibly complex for something so small.
Yeah.
How do they actually work at the molecular level?
It's intricate, but we can break it down. It all starts in the cell's nucleus, where the DNA lives. The instructions for building a microRNA are found in a microRNA gene.
Okay, so there's a blueprint for the microRNA itself.
Exactly. This gene gets transcribed, meaning its instructions are copied into a molecule called a primary microRNA. It's like creating a draft of the microRNA's instructions.
A rough draft before the real action happens.
Right. This primary microRNA needs some editing before it can do its job. An enzyme called drosha steps in to trim down this primary microRNA inside the nucleus.
Drosha. Okay, that doesn't sound very friendly.
Maybe not, but it's essential. This trimmed down version is called a precursor microRNA, and it's ready for the next stage of its journey.
So it gets shipped out of the nucleus.
You got it. It's transported into the cell's cytoplasm, where most of the protein building action happens.
So the precursor microRNA is ready to get to work.
Not quite. It needs one more crucial step. Another enzyme called dicer comes into play.
Dicer. Two slightly scary names in a row. What does dicer do?
Dicer gives the final cut, shaping the precursor microRNA into its mature, active form. Think of it as the final training exercise. Now, our microRNA is prepped and ready for action.
So is it ready to start controlling protein production now?
Almost. It needs to team up with a protein complex called RIC. This is where things get really interesting. This RISC complex, it's like the machinery that allows the microRNA to do its job.
Okay, so it's not the microRNA itself that's controlling everything. It needs this RISC complex to actually make things happen.
Exactly. Think of it like this. The microRNA is like a detective with a warrant, and RISC is its squad ready to enforce the law.
So how does this microRNA RISC complex actually work? I'm picturing a police lineup or something.
Not a bad analogy. This complex patrols the cell searching for specific messenger RNA molecules. Remember, those are the instructions for building proteins.
Right, so if the DNA is the blueprint and the microRNA is the regulator, then the messenger RNA is like the construction worker carrying those blueprints around.
Precisely. The microRNA RISC complex is looking for a specific sequence on the messenger RNA that matches its own. It's like checking for a specific address on a warrant.
And if it finds a match, what happens then? Does it arrest the messenger RNA?
Sort of. If there's a perfect match, the RISC complex can actually chop up the messenger RNA, completely destroying it.
Wow, talk about taking out the competition. But what if it's not a perfect match? Does the microRNA just give up?
Not necessarily. Even a partial match can be enough to disrupt things. Instead of destroying the messenger RNA, The microRNA RSE complex might just cling to it.
It's kind of like slapping handcuffs on it and slowing it down.
Exactly. This makes it much harder for the cell's machinery to read the messenger RNA and build the protein. It's like tying up the construction workers' hands so they can't do their job.
So the microRNA RSE complex can either eliminate the messenger RNA completely or just make its life really difficult.
Precisely. And that's how they fine-tune protein production in the cell. It's all about control.
So we've gone from a rough draft to a highly trained team enforcing the rules of gene expression. It's amazing how much complexity is packed into this tiny process.
It really is remarkable. And when you consider how much these microRNAs impact everything from how our bodies develop to how we fight off diseases, it's mind-blowing.
Okay, let's talk about that. You said development. How do these tiny molecules play a role in something as massive as building a human being from scratch?
It all goes back to this intricate control over protein production. During development, different cells need to become different things. Muscle cells, brain cells, skin cells, and microRNAs help orchestrate this entire process.
So they're like the choreographers of our development, making sure each cell's in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing.
Exactly. They make sure the right proteins are being made at the right levels at the right time, ensuring that development unfolds according to plan.
And what happens if something goes wrong with this process?
Well, if the microRNAs aren't functioning correctly, it can lead to developmental problems, things like birth defects or developmental disorders. Scientists are just beginning to understand the full scope of their impact.
It makes you realize just how crucial these tiny molecules are. We've talked about development, but what about something like cancer? The research you sent mentioned that quite a bit. How do microRNAs play a role in diseases like that?
That's a huge area of research right now. Remember how we talked about microRNAs acting like brakes on protein production?
Yeah, they can either slow down or completely stop the production of certain proteins.
Well, sometimes those proteins they're controlling are involved in cell growth and division, the very processes that can go haywire in cancer.
So if a microRNA that normally suppresses tumor growth isn't working properly, could that lead to cancer?
Exactly. In many cancers, researchers have found that the levels of certain microRNAs are abnormal. This imbalance can fuel uncontrolled cell growth and tumor formation.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
Like those microRNA breaks have failed and the cell is speeding out of control.
It's a simplification, but you're getting the idea. It's like having a car with a faulty brake pedal, dangerous and unpredictable.
So it's all about maintaining the right balance of microRNAs in our cells.
Exactly. And that's why this discovery is so significant for medicine. If we can figure out how to manipulate these tiny molecules, we could potentially develop entirely new ways to treat diseases like cancer.
So we're talking about potentially groundbreaking cancer treatments, all thanks to these tiny microRNAs.
It's true. And the more we learn about microRNAs, the more we realize just how much potential they hold. It's like we've uncovered this hidden language inside our cells, this secret code that controls so much of what goes on.
And we're just starting to crack the code, right?
Yeah.
What other secrets are these microRNAs hiding?
Well, for a long time, we thought they were confined to the cells in which they were made. But recent research has shown that's not entirely true.
Wait, really? They can travel outside of their home cells. How is that even
Bizarre.
possible? They're so tiny.
I know, it's incredible. It turns out they can be packaged up into these tiny vesicles, like little protective bubbles that can be released from the cell and travel to other parts of the body.
So they're like cellular messengers carrying instructions or signals to other cells far away.
Exactly. They can actually enter those distant cells and influence gene expression there. It's like a whole communication network we never even knew existed.
That opens up some really wild possibilities for medicine. If we could understand those messages, we could potentially manipulate them, right?
Exactly. For example, imagine a blood test that could analyze your microRNA profile.
Hold on, you're saying these microRNA messengers are floating around in our blood?
They are. And since their levels can change in response to disease, this could be a powerful tool for early diagnosis.
So theoretically, you could detect things like cancer or heart disease just by looking at these tiny molecules in the blood.
That's the idea. And because microRNAs are involved in so many different biological processes, this type of test could potentially detect a wide range of diseases, maybe even before symptoms appear.
That's like having a window into the future of our health. It's incredible to think how far we've come from thinking these molecules were insignificant to now realizing they could revolutionize how we diagnose and treat diseases.
And it's not just about early detection. MicroRNAs could also hold the key to developing more targeted therapies.
What do you mean by targeted therapies?
Well, right now, many treatments are pretty blunt instruments. They affect healthy cells along with the sick ones. But microRNAs offer a level of specificity that's really unprecedented.
Because they're so specific in the genes they target.
Precisely. We could potentially design therapies that manipulate the levels of very specific microRNAs, either increasing or decreasing their activity to achieve a desired therapeutic effect.
So, for example, if a certain microRNA is overactive in cancer cells, you could develop a therapy that specifically targets and silences that microRNA.
Exactly. And because you're not affecting other microRNAs or other cellular processes, these treatments have the potential to be much more effective and have fewer side effects.
That's remarkable. It sounds like microRNAs could usher in a new era of personalized medicine, tailoring treatments to each individual patient.
Absolutely. Imagine a future where we can analyze a patient's microRNA profile to determine the best course of treatment for their specific condition. It's personalized medicine at its finest.
It's amazing to think that we're just at the tip of the iceberg with microRNA research.
Right.
Who knows what other incredible discoveries await us in the future?
One thing's for sure. This is a field with enormous potential, and I can't wait to see what the future holds.
I'm with you there. This has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of microRNAs. Thanks for joining us, everyone.